Hi and welcome. This is Homebody Rundown. I'm HR, and this video is just a few meals that I have made over the last couple months. Not a recipe channel. I don't go into great detail with measurements or anything like that. If there's a similar recipe that I can find online, I do post it in the description. And I am currently just cooking for myself, my husband, and my youngest child who still lives at home. My husband and I eat a pescatarian diet that's vegetarian with seafood. At least that's how we describe it. Youngest child does eat chicken, so I do make different things for her that I am not showing in the video. That's usually very basic. I'll just pre-cook some chicken from Costco or buy chicken tenders, something like that when she wants chicken. Usually in these videos, I'm showing more desserts that I make, but I haven't had to make many recently because I've had so many cookies and breads in the freezer that I've just been able to pull out and use up over the last couple months. Starting off with some black beans, I cook these in the Instant Pot. They were dried beans that I soaked overnight, and then I do add a little bit of seasoning to these when I cook them. I let them cool down. Some will go in the freezer just as the whole bean with the cooking liquid, and the rest I will mash, take out some of the liquid, and use as a refried black bean. I do like to label these mostly for the date. I can usually tell what they are, but I would like to know how old they are. I tend to go through the stuff in our freezer fairly quickly, and I saw that you can write on the surface of these Snapware, so I need to figure that out. Going to use some of those black beans to make a black bean soup. I'm not following a recipe. This is just stuff I had around the house, including roasted garlic from the freezer, a lot of spices, and bouillon cubes. These are vegetarian bouillon cubes, frozen corn, and tomato paste. Adding oil. I did have fresh onion and fresh green pepper, so I will let those cook down for a few minutes and then adding in that frozen corn. Normally I would add salt, but I'm holding off because the bouillon has a lot of sodium in it. And here's the spices in bouillon. I'll let this just kind of cook or toast in the oil with the veggies for a few minutes, especially to let the veggies get a little bit softer. Adding in some of that frozen roasted garlic. I'm not adding all of it that was in that jar. And this is the dried oregano. Now when I've followed recipes for a black bean soup, I think you usually put bay leaves in it, but I did not do that on this day. This is some tomato sauce, and that's going to help kind of clear the bottom of the pan. And here are the black beans and their cooking liquid. This is what was left in the Instant Pot pan. I've got in the cilantro, some fresh tomatoes. Got this stuff mixed in, and then I added a little more liquid, just water, so it would have enough as it cooked down, and added some lime juice, and I can tell you this was too much lime juice. It really only needed a tiny bit for that flavor, so next time I need to be more careful with that. I keep tasting this because I'm not following a recipe. I need to just season as I go. So it needed a little more sodium, and I added in more garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper mix. So this has been simmering for a while. You can see it's cooked down a bit. And while this was going, I made some black bean quesadillas, and I had a little bit of that refried black bean left over, so I just stirred that into the soup. Here's how it turned out. This was really good. I mean, you can add some cheese or sprinkle over some crumbled tortilla chips, and that would be delicious. I also made cornbread on this day, which is good sprinkled into the soup as well. I will put a link to a very similar recipe down below. I add 2 eggs, which I think the recipe only calls for 1. I'm always modifying recipes. Sorry, this is not a recipe channel, but if there is a similar one, I will link it in the description below. So anyway, getting in the sugar and liquid ingredients, mixing this up. Now I'm getting the dry ingredients in there. I do use a fairly coarse ground cornmeal. I think it is. I've definitely bought some that are more finely ground. I believe this is the cornmeal I order from Azure Standard online, but it's good. It's definitely a different texture than the finer stuff in the finished product, but we all like it. I bake my cornbread in a cast iron pan. I melted maybe half a tablespoon of butter and then spread that around before I poured in the batter. I let it cool down for, I would say, at least 10 minutes, and then I flip it over onto a cooling rack. And I didn't show it, but I kind of really drop it to help just release it. And usually it comes out pretty well. So here's what it looks like. It was very good. It was a little dark on top, but it was still delicious. It wasn't burned in any way. And there's only 3 of us at home right now because our 2 oldest kids are at college. So we will not go through all of this quickly enough. So I do freeze about half of it so I can pull that out later. Today I am making a cheesy broccoli soup. I am just making this up. There's not a similar recipe in the description because this is just stuff I had around the house. Had some older carrots, so I chopped those up. Fresh broccoli. Usually I use frozen. And it was inspired by the shredded cheese you see there. I ordered a smoked cheddar from Azure Standard and I wanted to try it in a soup. I thought it might be a pretty interesting flavor. Added the oil and carrots to the pan. Seasonings include onion powder, garlic powder, black pepper, mushroom umami seasoning from Trader Joe's. Adding in 2 different types of vegetarian bouillon. One is a not chicken kind of flavor, and the other one's just a garden veggie, and a little bit of butter. This is more of that roasted garlic that I had defrosted from the freezer. Let the carrots cook for, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes. Then I added in all-purpose flour to make a roux, and I'll slowly whisk in water and milk. Gave it a taste and adjusted the seasonings, added more garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper, and now I'm adding in the broccoli. Because I had just added in more milk and water, this was not boiling hot. I had turned the heat way down because you do not want to get splattered with the boiling mix as you add in the broccoli. You could also just use a big spoon or spider to add this in. And I had to keep adjusting the liquid to make sure that the broccoli was going to have enough to cook. Now, this is a little different than what I normally do. Normally, if I was using fresh broccoli, I would cut it up small in the food processor before I even added it. And this is nutritional yeast. But this time I added in the full pieces and I won't do that again. It took forever to get that stuff soft enough to use the stick blender to chop up the broccoli. And before I used the stick blender, I had turned off the heat and let it cool down. Added in maybe a cup of cheese. I didn't go crazy. And this turned out delicious. My husband absolutely loved it. The smoky flavor was really interesting, but I have to say I prefer the extra sharp cheddar cheese. I think that's just more interesting in here than the smoked cheddar. Showing the ingredients that I use to make apple bread. This is something I've showed multiple times in my videos, so I'm not going to go through all the steps, but I do usually replace some all-purpose flour with whole wheat flour. On this day, I used all whole wheat flour, and it tends to be a little bit of a more dense, smaller loaf when I do that. I also added in some flax seed. but it has plenty of sugar, and I use applesauce usually instead of apples, so it's still very sweet and everybody loves it. We won't eat all of this at once, so as usual, I will pre-slice it and put about half of it in the freezer. I really felt like sloppy joes, but we eat a pescatarian diet primarily, that's vegetarian with seafood. So this is my weird, maybe vegetarian version of sloppy joes, and I'm just using some leftover veggie meats and black beluga lentils. The veggie meats are both Beyond brand. I had a burger and some of these crumbles. I'm not a big fan of the crumbles. I don't like the texture very much, but I needed to use them up because they're expensive and I didn't want them to get freezer burned. And I just want to take a minute and apologize for some of the bad angles in this video and the focus issues with the camera. Our under counter lighting stopped working, so I had to set up a lamp, and it was where I usually put the camera. So anyway, I didn't realize I kept moving my hand in front of the camera and causing issues. But anyway, added in some fresh cut white onion and I think 2 green peppers. I am also adding in lentils, and the beluga lentils are really nice because they hold their shape well. They don't really get as mushy as some other lentils, and this is the first time I had used them in a mix like this, like a sloppy joe mix, and I have to say I was a huge fan. These held their shape. I think I cooked them a little bit al dente. I had cooked them earlier in the day, so yeah, sorry, I forgot to say these are pre-cooked lentils. But they were excellent. I think I will totally keep doing this and adding the beluga lentils when I make sloppy joes. All right, I'm getting a little behind here. I added earlier quite a bit of Worcestershire sauce, and that has some sodium. I do not add any extra salt when I make this because the condiments have a lot of sodium. The condiments are ketchup, yellow mustard, and barbecue sauce. And I don't use any particular measurement, obviously. I'm just tasting these as we go to see if it needs more of the condiments. This turned out fantastic. I really love this. I think I would just use the Beyond burgers and the beluga lentils in the future. My husband ate his on a bun. I'm just eating mine in a bowl with some of that smoked cheddar and diced tomatoes. On this day, I'm making an enchilada casserole. I have a recipe to make this in the Instant Pot, but today I am using the stovetop in the oven. So I'm adding in lots of seasonings and the enchilada sauce. These are some of those black beans that I put in the freezer that still had some liquid with them. I have more of that smoked cheddar, fresh tomatoes. There were also fresh onions and fresh green peppers, frozen corn, and some leftover rice. This is avocado oil, and I'm using an enameled cast iron pan, and this can go from the stovetop into the oven. Getting the diced green fresh pepper and white onion along with frozen yellow sweet corn into the pan. Forgot to pull it out earlier, but I am also adding in garlic powder along with the paprikas, chipotle powder, and chili powder. And I added in salt, and I didn't need to do that at this point because the enchilada sauce also has sodium. It has quite a bit of sodium, I think. So I should have waited to see if it needed more salt after I added in that sauce. It seemed a little dry, so I did add in more oil just while this stuff was sauteing. Did not add in the whole jar of sauce. This is just part of it, and I'll just kind of see if it needs more when I get the rest of the ingredients in here. But the liquid helps pull up all of the seasoning and flavor on the bottom of the pan. This has been cooking for a little while. I did add more enchilada sauce, and the green peppers just were not getting tender. I don't know why that is. I feel like they should have been more tender at this point, but it took forever and they were still a little bit, uh, not crunchy, but definitely not as soft as I would have expected after this was done. Added in the cooked leftover white rice and cilantro. We'll get that mixed in along with the black beans. These are some of those black beans that I made in the Instant Pot, and they have some of their cooking liquid in with them. I'll get this mixed in and see if I can add in more rice. I don't like it when there's too much grain or rice in a dish like this, but it was okay. The pan wasn't overfilled and it didn't seem to be a really high rice ratio in it, so was able to finish off the jar of black beans and the leftover rice. Got that stirred in, and I forgot to show it, but I added in a little bit of Greek yogurt and stirred that in to give it some creaminess without adding cheese into the casserole dish. On top, though, I'm spreading some fresh diced tomatoes and some shredded cheese. Now I put it into the oven for about 10 minutes at 350, and then I turned on the broiler for the last minute or two on low just to get some crispiness on that cheese. And this was more of the smoked cheddar cheese. This was excellent. I loved the tomatoes, having fresh tomatoes to sprinkle on top. It really adds a lot of, I have no idea what the word is. I'm trying to think of all those years I watched Food Network. Brightness, maybe? I don't know. But it really adds a lot, and this was very good. Decided to make some homemade bread. I am using my KitchenAid mixer because I just couldn't bring myself to do it by hand. I really wanted to stop using my mixer when I was doing large quantities of flour, but I mean, ideally, I would love to get one of those Bosch mixers, but I think they're about $600, so I don't know when I'll get one of those. But I mean, it seemed fine, so hopefully I'm not destroying the motor on my KitchenAid. Anyway, this recipe, I have to warm some milk and sugar, butter, and salt on the stove. Not to a boil, it needs to be lower. I can't remember what the temperature is. It says it in the recipe. So if I can find it, I will link it below. So I do use my thermometer, and if I get it too hot, which sometimes has happened, I just let it cool down before I add it to the flour and yeast. This recipe, you only start with part of the flour, then you add in the rest, and I replace part of the all-purpose flour with whole wheat flour. This makes it more dense, and it does tend to make it have a thicker crust. I really need to try and experiment with some new recipes for bread, but this is just one I've done for years, and everyone eats it, so I just keep making this one. It's going into the oven on proof, so that'll be for quite a while. I think I do an hour and a half or 2 hours on the first proof when I add the whole wheat flour because it takes longer with the whole wheat flour. Now at this point, and this might help the rise on this, if I did the step where you are supposed to work this dough a little bit and then roll it to get a nice dough shape. I skip all of that. I just dump the dough out, cut it in half, and put it in the loaf pans. I just have some joint pain, so sometimes I just skip those steps, and it's usually still edible and just fine, although it would probably look prettier if I made a nicer shaped loaf. So anyway, got those cut in half, and I'm just covering them for about 10 minutes, and then I will put them into a greased loaf pan. I spray this with avocado oil spray from Costco, and it works really well. Usually these pop right out, and I do bake them in a glass pan. So the loaves are not very tall, and you can see here the thickness of the crust. But we don't use this for sandwiches. Usually this is for toast, and so it's just fine. I will freeze part of this, and if it gets dried out at all, I just use it in a French toast casserole or making grilled cheese, something like that. This is the book, Better Homes and Gardens. It's an old cookbook of mine. That's where the bread recipe is from. And now onto a new thing. This is King Arthur gluten-free brownie mix, and I'm making this for us. We do not eat gluten-free. I just have these on hand for when people come over, but I've had this one for a while and I don't think it has an expiration date on it. I think it just got missed. I mean, I could be wrong. It could be there. That's happened plenty of times where it's right in front of my face, but I couldn't find it. So I didn't want to make this for other people. So I figured it's going to be fine, but I'm just going to make it for us to eat. And it's so powdery. I should have maybe like put a towel over it while I stirred because there was just chocolatey brownie dust floating everywhere. But got that mixed up. It's really easy. And this is a sprayed glass baking dish. The batter is very sticky, like all the other gluten-free brownie mixes that I've ever made. So it takes a little more effort just to get it into a more even layer. But it is totally worth the effort because these things are amazing. They are by far the best gluten-free brownie that I've made. I've only made a few brands, always box mixes, but these were excellent. Maybe that extra powdery mix helps because it doesn't have as much of that grainy texture that some of them do, but the flavor was good and just, I highly recommend this one if you need gluten-free. For this night's dinner, I am making a Thai shrimp gyoza. It is a frozen item from Trader Joe's. I don't think I've ever bought it before. I had some frozen cooked brown rice I defrosted, some frozen edamame, and pulled out a few other seasonings and had some roasted garlic and ginger in the freezer. So into this cast iron pan, I'm adding oil, avocado oil, and some toasted sesame oil and putting in those frozen gyoza and getting them kind of all arranged so they're more on a flat side. Just following the instructions on the bag for this, and I mean, it may say to use a non-stick pan, but the cast iron's fairly non-stick. Into another pan, I am cooking down the onions, and I had put the cilantro and onions in the same bowl for some reason, and so I'm trying to only do the green onions right now. And I added the garlic and the ginger, which was frozen, so I let that cook until it defrosted. Now I'm adding in some of that brown rice. And it was dry-ish from the freezer, so I did add a little water so it would have some moisture to absorb. Adding some seasonings like sriracha and Japanese barbecue sauce. And there is oil in this pan as well. Now I'm adding in some of that cilantro after everything's heated through. And these are sesame seeds. And this came together really quick. It was very easy to do since the rice was already cooked. And we have lots of sauces that we can add onto the rice when we go to eat. Getting back to those frozen gyoza, I had added water, which I showed earlier but didn't mention, and so it evaporated. Then I let it crisp up a little more. I have Thai sweet ginger sauce and soy sauce that I'm using as a dipping sauce for the gyoza. And the edamame I just boiled with some salt. Added lots of hot sauce to my rice because I like it spicy, but the gyoza were just really plain. The filling to me did not have enough flavor, so I don't think I'll buy them again. All right, next up is a lentil dish that I was inspired to make from a pre-packaged meal that I saw at Trader Joe's. I believe it's pronounced Tadka Dal, and I used red lentils. I pre-cooked those. And I did also I looked at the ingredients on the bag at Trader Joe's, and then I looked at a few recipes online just to get an idea of all the flavors that are usually included. So this is in no way authentic, and maybe I shouldn't even call it the Tadka Dal, but it was inspired by that. Into this pan, I have avocado oil and olive oil with frozen diced white onion. These have a lot of moisture, so I did let them cook for a few extra minutes just to let some of that evaporate. Now, most of the recipes I looked at, they used ghee, but I'm just using oil. Spices included turmeric and cumin, coriander, mustard seed, garam masala, paprika. This is roasted garlic that I had in the freezer and defrosted. Now at this point I should have added in ginger, and I completely forgot about it. So luckily I remember at the very end, but this is when I should have added this in. This still smelled amazing at this point. Looked really good. I had a little bit of fresh tomato in the refrigerator, so I put that in with some mild green chilies that come in the little cans. I had some of those in the freezer, so I defrosted it. And this is a bouillon cube. It is a vegetarian version of chicken bouillon, and it has a lot of sodium. So this is where I'm going to get most of the salt. I added a little earlier. I cooked red lentils earlier in the day. They're a very small lentil, so they cook really quickly and they break down quite a bit. They become very soft. I've put them into soups before and they kind of disappear in there. At this point, I wanted more tomato flavor, so I opened a jar of some crushed tomatoes. I think in some of the recipes I looked at, there was more than one type of legume or lentil, but I just used the red lentils. The roasted cauliflower and green onions was all me. It was just stuff I had in the refrigerator that I wanted to use up, so I threw it in, and it was not in any recipe I saw. This was where I finally remembered the ginger. This is frozen ginger, so I had to let that defrost and got that mixed in, and I'm so glad I did. That ginger flavor really added a lot, and I love this. My husband really liked it too, and I think we ate this all in 2 days. So overall, I would say the highlights out of these meals had to be the lentils inspired by the Tadka Dal and the sloppy joes with the beluga lentils. Both of those were excellent, and I totally plan to make those again. Hopefully there was some inspiration in this video for you, either things to make or things to definitely not make. But either way, if you have watched all the way through, I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.